Welcome to the Inconceivably Connected podcast. I'm your host and fellow donor conceived person, Nick Ludwig. On this week's episode, we'll be speaking with a man named Zachary from the very small town of Price, Texas, an area in the northeastern part of the state with a population of only a few hundred people. Zachary's story has a bit of a different tone than what I think we've become accustomed to so far on the show. Instead of his life flipping upside down, in many ways, his donor-conceived discovery seemed to turn his life right side up. Stark contrasts exist between Zachary's life before and after his DCP journey began, and I think it's safe to say he was excited to walk through the new doors that started opening for him. I often wonder what sort of ingredients are in the mix for certain donor-conceived people who sit so comfortably with their newfound truths. How is it that something could be so devastating to many, yet be so rewarding for others? I suspect it's all circumstantial, but is it possible there could be something more to it? I really don't know, but I do hope conversations like the one I had with Zachary can perhaps inch us closer to some of these answers. This was an especially fun one for me, as it was yet another reminder that there's no right or wrong way to be donor-conceived. Zachary, take it away.
Hey ladies and gentlemen, my name is Zachary Sayuke, and I'm from the big city of Price, Texas. Yep, I'm one of the whole 400 or 500 some odd people from there, and I get the joy of being on Nick's podcast right here. And I'm really, really ecstatic. Thanks in advance for those y'all that are going to listen to it. I love sharing my story. I love talking. You'll learn very quickly I'm a talker. But yeah, let's get this thing rolling. So you wanted to know about my whole donor conception story. Well, I guess the best place to start is at the beginning. So, well, let's see. I was born, and I would say that was pretty cool for the most of it. I don't know, my mother might have had some complaints. I showed up at about 3:21 in the morning, so might have not been the best moment for her, but she was happy shortly after. So my mother was married to a dude who was infertile for nearly 11 years, and they ended up purchasing sperm from a clinic to have me with. But that's not how they raised me. Now, there's a lot that could be, can be, and probably will be said during the story, but due to the knowledge and information they had back then, the doctors told my mother and her husband at the time, to raise me as if I was his child, which now looking back in hindsight, that's the absolute worst thing you could ever do for a child. I have my issues with the guy that my mom was married to, but even outside of that, even if he had have been a good person, there still could have been a high likelihood of a lot of issues developing in a child, at least not knowing who their biological father is, or being led to think that someone else is, and then trying to see themselves in that person and it not syncing up.
Sure.
But yeah, so anyway, growing up as a kid, I started to notice things, but I was never suspicious of who my father was. For a little bit of context, my mother's ex-husband, I call him the evil, wicked stepdad, kind of like Cinderella, but we'll get to some of that in a minute. But he kind of looked like, or he looked, now he's old, but he looked like a really, really, really scrawny version of Jeff Goldblum in Jurassic Park. That's the easiest way to describe him. Really, really tall, thin, really black, curly hair. He kind of had like a Middle Eastern-ish kind of look to him, you know. He actually didn't know what his ethnicity was because he never knew who his real father was. But I would assume it was something like that, you know. And if any of y'all get a look at me, I'm pretty white, got brown hair, straight hair at that. And I was a little on the chubbier side growing up, and that guy had never been chubby a day in his life. So there were times where I felt a little insecure about how I looked because I judged what I was supposed to look like based off of him. And I'm like, well, why am I so pale? Why am I so chubby? Why is my hair straight? You know, and I kind of just compartmentalized it, but I automatically looked at myself as if I was ugly from a really young age. And once I got into my teen years, I had very little confidence with trying to talk to girls because it's almost like I just looked at myself as unattractive already and I had lower self-esteem back then. And other things started to bubble up. There were certain skills and things that he could do that I couldn't do, and certain things that I really excelled at that he didn't do. But it was almost like I felt ashamed about the things that made me feel unique and special because I didn't think I was supposed to be good at those. I wanted to do whatever it was he did, you know. So right. that caused quite a few issues in its own right. But growing up, it really didn't get too bad until I was about 10 or 11. And I guess I outgrew the puppy phase and he started to lose interest. And I guess he started to really realize that I wasn't his biological kid. And he started to get a lot more distant with me. And I want to say less caring about a lot of my emotional state and things, and started to see me more as a chore. And anyway, At about the age of 12 or 13, he finally told me, look, Zachary, I want you to understand this. I love you. You're like my son. You know, I'm going to raise you, whatever, blah, 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 blah. But I want you to know your mother is a terrible, evil person, and she's had many affairs on me. And you are most likely the product of one of the affairs she had on me. Now, I'm not going to blame you for that. Just because you're not my child does not mean I can't love you. But I'm going to stay in this marriage with your evil, horrible mother just because I can't stand to see an innocent child like you go without a father. So basically, it was a manipulation tactic to make himself sound like a martyr, make my mother sound bad, make me resent her. And unfortunately, it worked throughout my teenage years. My mother was diagnosed with Meniere's disorder, which is an inner ear imbalance issue. And at the time, late 90s, early 2000s, that was still kind of a new thing. And the doctors just threw all the different kinds of pills at her. And she got really kind of strung out. Granted, it was all legal, it was all prescribed, but, you know, drugs can still be drugs, you know. And so she was really not in a position to defend herself. And so he just started gassing me up with all sorts of crazy allegations of stuff that she did and things that she did this way. And he had me turned against her. And then they would fight and they would argue. And then both of them would come to me and I was like their little corner ring boy on the boxing match, you know, which, you know, looking back now is incredibly inappropriate for a child to be like the shoulder to cry on for two adults in a marriage. But anyway, the orchestra lasted throughout most of my teen years. I got really resentful of my mother. You know, it really, really, really sucks and it really hurt a lot. There was a lot of things damaged, but finally there come a point to where I finally realized that I don't know if my mother's really as bad as he makes her sound, and why is he staying with her if she's so damn bad, you know? Well, about that time, I'm in the 11th grade, and I develop a crush on my English teacher. And no, it was very age inappropriate. She was not fresh out of college. She was 25 years older than me. And I vowed to at least bet her once after I graduated. I wasn't going to get her in trouble, and, you know, even now that I know she's an evil person, still wouldn't want to get her in trouble. That's very unsportsmanlike, you know? But after I graduated high school, I cast my cast out there and I got her, and that ended up turning into a 2-year hell on earth relationship. Whoopsie. And finally, in that relationship, my mother saw how bad I was struggling. And in the face of everything, her and my mother's ex-husband, evil, wicked stepdad dude, they were going to get a divorce. They split up. And then she and I really started to compare receipts. And one of the men that he accused me accused her of having an affair on him with was this one fellow that was from our town, and I actually knew his children. And so there was many times I pondered and I'm like, oh wow, are those my brother and sister? And you know, I'd see this guy, because again, our town's really small, so you go to the gas station, you know everybody in the store, you know what I mean? Right. And so I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, are those my brothers and sisters? Is this the family I've been missing out on my entire life? Has that evil mother of mine been keeping me from it, you know? So my mother and I compare receipts. We start to rekindle our relationship. She gets off the medicine and she convinces me to leave this evil English teacher that I had no business being with. And my whole hometown hated her. She was from out of town. She was really mean, had a really bad attitude. And she just caught me at the right point in my life with low enough self-esteem and had me pretty good there for a little bit. But luckily, fixing my relationship with my mother, connecting and all that, it brought me up out of it. I break up with her. Again, my mother and evil ex-stepdad dude are on the phrase of getting a divorce. And what does she do? She slides in and hooks up with the guy that raised me.
Wow.
So then they go off to another county and have a courthouse marriage while my mother is still waiting to get divorced from him. Mm-hmm. And it ends up turning out into this big, awful, disgusting mess. This woman who was a teacher in my hometown wrote all these nasty, vulgar Christmas cards and sent them to my grandmother and my mother, and we couldn't really trace it back or anything because, you know, handwriting analysts, that's expensive in a county like this, and it would have took forever, and what would have it even accomplished? But it was pretty bad there for a while. And then she kept trying to follow us on social media, you know, stuff that you wouldn't expect of a woman in her late 40s, but I digress. The point is, Mom and I reunite. I take my mom in with me. We ditched those two in the past. My mother gets her divorce finalized, and then she joins me on my travels. And during this process, I ask her, I'm like, look, I know he's not my father, but I asked her, this other guy, I said, is he my father? And she goes, well, what, that one? I said, yes, that one. And she said, son, you do realize the last time I've slept with that man was in 1977. You would be 14 years older if he were your father. Good to know. Okay. And so she said, no, absolutely not. And she goes, it's from a donor. Like a donor? Like a sperm donor, you know? And she said yes. And in my circles, at least, that is completely unheard of even being a thing. I mean, I have to, when I word this within people within my personal social circles, I have to say a donor from a clinic. If I say a sperm donor where I'm from, it's just a euphemism for a failed relationship, or it's like a scarlet letter you put on a guy to try to shame him or whatever. And so I always have to preface that, because then they'll ask me, well, why didn't your mom let you meet him? And then I go, because he was an actual donor from an actual clinic. And then it just blows these people's minds, because to them, that's like the movies. That's not real life.
Yeah.
Now, like some higher social classes and things, you know, obviously not a town of 400, 500 people, but, you know, people from larger cities, they kind of understand that a little bit better. But a lot of my people, as I call them, that's just totally alien to them. So, and honestly, I really had trouble believing it. First of all, because why would my mother lie to me about something? But then I was already prepped for the lie. So honestly, in quiet, I resented her and absolutely was just totally distraught over it. I didn't show any of it, but I decided to go ahead and do my own research just to put it all to bed. I said, what do I have to lose? Hopefully I'm not this crazy asshole's kid. And even if I am, well, I kind of already thought I was for the first few years or so. And even if I don't ever find out who my dad is, maybe I can at least find a cousin or two, or at least know something about my history. So maybe I want to have children or something, you know?
Sure.
So I do Ancestry DNA, and I find a second cousin. And she explains to me that I'm from the Sayuke family. That's the last name that I bear now. And she said that she wants to help me, but it's a little complicated. And I said, look, ma'am, I'm all about complicated. Trust me, what's up? She said, well, out of my generation starts in 1944 and it ends in 1966. I said, okay. And she said, from that 22-year span of grandkids being born, there are 36 of us. It's like, oh, Jesus. I said, y'all didn't have cable back then, did you? And so she explains to me, well, we can at least already knock out all the girls. So that cuts it down to about 18 boys to pick from. And, you know, you do the years. I mean, really, someone born in 66 would have been old enough, just as someone in 44 would have been old enough. So that's still a pretty good range for someone to be old enough to be my dad, you know. So then I asked my mother, I pump her for information. And mind you, I was absolutely furious with my mother. Because the first thing that popped in my head once I really accepted the fact that I knew I was donor conceived was, I've got a real dad that's probably not an asshole like that dude that I thought was my dad. I have siblings out there, and I've always wanted to have family or connection or something. Another thing about growing up in a small town is just about everybody has a big family around them, and I was the one guy that wasn't kin to at least 20 people there, you know what I mean? And a lot of my friends, they felt sympathetic toward me, but they were always kind of sad for me because they're like, oh, well, what do you do for Christmas or Thanksgiving? I'm like, well, I have my mom and my grandma, and, you know, they're just like, oh, but your family doesn't show up? And I'm like, that is my family, you know? So it was always kind of sad.
Yeah.
But anyway, I was really resentful toward my mother about that. Incredibly bitter. And I said, you know what? To hell with it. I'm going to figure out, I'm going to go. The worst thing any of these relatives, I mean, at the time I was 22, 23, you know, I thought to myself, the worst they can do is tell me to go F off, and I'm back where I started. So we're going to see about it. And again, the reason I bring my age up is you never know how far along you are in life. I lost 3 of my best friends when I was 20. And so I've been very, very mindful of that. I don't ever tell anyone, oh, you're so young, you have the whole rest of your life ahead of you. Nor do I tell myself that. I mean, I live every day like it's my last, because it very well could be. And basically, I had my midlife crisis at 20 when I lost my 3 best friends. But what I want to really point out of that is, I thought, what you got to lose? So I did Ancestry DNA. I found that cousin. She started helping me saw it down. And I asked my mother, what do you know about this guy? And she goes, I know he was a medical student. That's all I know. And then she said, and I think on his information sheet, it said he was 6'3". And so there turns out to only be 2 doctors in the whole Sayuke family. And I narrow it down to 2 brothers, and I start doing a little bit of internet stalking. And without even any confirmation, I come across a YouTube video with my father on it, and I see him, and I immediately break down into tears. I know he's the guy. Without even having to confirm, I know he is the dude.
Yeah.
And So I very nervously write him a letter. Then I find out another twist in this turn. You know, they do say that the truth is stranger than fiction, in case you hadn't heard that. So turns out he is an anesthesiologist at the time that has been incarcerated over a malpractice lawsuit. Okay. So he's in prison in South Carolina, and I'm going to nervously write him a letter wanting to know him. Meanwhile, being a doctor, being a little more of an upper class and all this, he's not used to the idea of people in prison that he knows, let alone being in prison himself. So he's embarrassed and all this. Me, used to the background I'm used to. You know, everybody has their past, right? So I very nervously write him a letter, and I'm like, hey, I don't know if you want to know me or not, but I think I might be your kid. I was born in 1991. I'm from Anonymous Sperm Donations. And he writes me back and says, yes, I donated my sperm in 1988. Most of my children are born in 91, and some of them are born in 90. I said, okay, then. So we plan to meet. I drive 11 hours out there to South Carolina to go meet him. And it was like meeting a celebrity. And it wasn't like meeting him. It was more like, it's good to see you again, not it's nice to meet you.
Right.
We hugged, we both cried, and I told him that I wanted to change my last name and I wanted to get legally adopted so I could get other dude off my paperwork and everything, and went through all the steps, got all that stuff done. Other dudes wiped clean from my record now. Hallelujah, praise Jesus. My dad is an awesome dude. He ended up getting out of the legal situation he was into. There was some dirty politics played on the people that prosecuted him, and luckily he was able to leverage that some. He's now living his best life. He has a pretty good relationship with about 12 of us. We're all over the board, different siblings and such.
Right. And if I could pause you right there for 1 second. When you went to go meet your biological father, had you been in touch with any of your donor half siblings, or is that later in the story when they come into the mix?
That is later. So okay. When it comes to, he kind of has a standardized format that he does when he meets new children, and he used to be the main controller of it, and since then I've kind of taken it over. He's handed it to me because of social media and everything. But used to, his little thing was he'd meet the kid, he would take them on a tour of New Orleans, which is his home city, and he would have very specific things from his childhood and early adulthood he would show them. And then it's almost like he had it down packed and like a little routine. And I was the first kid of his that he didn't get to do that for because, well, he was locked up. And
right.
So, and I was the first one to ever do all the research. The other siblings found him through the donor sibling registry. Okay. I was the first one to find him through a DNA test. I was the 5th kid to find him. Mm-hmm. But shortly after, I started getting to meet the rest of the siblings.
And remind me, how many half-siblings are there in total that you know of?
There are 26 of us currently, but he suspects there's probably upwards of 50 to 100.
Wow.
And that is because what's funny about it is when he first did it, they made him sound like it was going to be a limited number and that we would get to know him once we turned 13. He didn't choose to be anonymous. He actually chose to be accessible. There was an option for anonymous. There was an option for known. There was an option for accessible. And he would love to have a relationship with all of us, but he doesn't want to force himself anywhere, and he doesn't want to like reach his neck out and then get turned down, because that could be pretty tragic, for a parent too. So he just likes to be able to be found so the kids can find him. And so he was convinced that it was going to be not a limited amount of us, and we would all get to know him if we chose to at 13. So when the first 4 found him, he just kind of assumed, okay, that must be the majority of them that want to know me. Well, little did he realize a lot of us didn't even get any of his information. You could almost say that they kind of jerked him around on that deal. So anyway, I find him, and then I become the liaison through all the DNA sites. I'm on every DNA site there is, and I've actually developed an electronic onboarding packet that includes an Excel spreadsheet with all of the vital information on all the siblings that want to be known, phone numbers, you name it. I've even got a PowerPoint and a private YouTube video that I send them once we connect with the one online.
Got it. All right. So that's a lot of information that is readily available for new people entering the mix.
Yeah, I desired for a family, and it's just been a blessing. I don't know if you've ever heard the Voltaire quote, God is a comedian performing for an audience who's afraid to laugh, but I've learned that firsthand throughout just about every day of my life. And so anyway, since then we've discovered quite a few more, and the DNA tests have been a really good resource. Now, what's interesting about a lot of that is it's allowed us to have a lot of get-togethers. So for context, I have a lot of experience putting together large group gatherings because after I lost my 3 best friends, I hosted a commemorative festival in their honor in Price for about 5 or 6 years up until I decided to move, and then had to let it go. And now we just do something small, but I've had experience hosting big events. Okay. And so it started with one of my birthday parties, and I always dreamt about having a badass 27th birthday party because my birthday is September the 27th. So 27th on the 27th, golden birthday, whatever you want to call it. But I had my dad, brother from Chicago, and sister from Kansas City. They all showed up, and nearly the entire town of Price showed up, except for 2 people. I'll let you guess who they were. But yeah, 398 or 498, whichever the number is at this point, showed up, and they were lined up out the door just to meet my dad. And they're like, oh, wow, you're Zach's real dad. You're big and tall like him, and you're smart and you're nice. And oh my God, I knew that other guy couldn't have been Zach's dad. That's awesome. Yeah. And people that I haven't even talked to since high school were showing up to take pictures with him. And my brother and sister both got numerous Facebook connects from people they don't even remember meeting. And it was like a big spectacle for all of them. So it was a really neat, really big, happy moment of closure for the little town of Price. And since then, I've started hosting sibling reunions in every September, and it's to commemorate my birthday. My dad's birthday is in April. So we have other sibling reunions in New Orleans to commemorate or to celebrate his birthday. And it allows the siblings to have 2 possibilities to get to meet up each year. Now, we, of course, spend a lot of time together informally. Because of my career and because of how much I travel, I often find myself living with quite a few of my siblings, depending on the durations of jobs. I just spent 6 months in Kansas City and stayed with my sister. My sister Megan, she's 3 days younger than me. I was born on Friday. She was born on the following Monday. So I call her my twin. But yeah, I got to spend quite a bit of time with her. So it's been pretty awesome. We've been filming a lot of stuff. I love making content. Like I said at the beginning of this presentation, I told you I'm a talker. So, yeah, you were warned, but I love making this kind of stuff. I love doing these. Some people say it's narcissism, and it probably is, but at least I'm functioning well. Okay, I control it with diet and exercise. But I've really, really enjoyed it, and I want to touch some hearts with some people. I know that not every situation is going to be as amazing as mine was, but I've definitely got my stances on a lot of the ethics when it comes to donor conception. I've seen a lot of different points of the community online. I've got preferred groups and not so preferred groups. My favorite donor conceived group on Facebook is called Donor Conceived with a Sense of Humor. They're hysterical and they're very good, thick-skinned, hearty individuals, my kind of people. But I've also reached out to a couple other groups and such, and I've shared my story. There's quite a bit of things though, but what did I leave out? Tell me what you're hungry for, man.
Well, that's a lot to chew on right there. And I think where I'll begin is with your half-sibling group. I mean, you've got quite, a large group there. So talk to me about how it's felt to kind of form these new relationships with so many people that are biologically connected to you. And how do you make time to make sure that each one of your biological connections gets, the appropriate attention that they deserve?
That's a very good question. I love that. I knew you'd have a good one. So having found all these siblings, it kind of puts you in a interesting situation because, you didn't grow up with them, but yet you still feel like you've known them your whole life. It's kind of like what I said about my dad when I first met him. When I first met him, I was like, this dude's my dad. There's just no way around it. I mean, he was doing things like the way he sat. Like I crossed my legs when I sit. My mother used to always get on to me for it. And as soon as he sat down, he crossed his legs, and she just goes, you've got that bad habit, and that's where it comes from. And it's funny how many of our thoughts and views on life are the same. A lot of our tastes and things are the same. I mean, that it's like they say, birds fly and fish swim for a reason, And I really believe that wholeheartedly, especially after this experience. Now, with my siblings, like I said about my dad, it's like it's not a nice to meet you, it's been a while sort of situation.
Yeah.
Anyway, with my siblings, just like I said with my dad, it's great to see you again, not nice to meet you.
Right.
And there's quite a few that have different backgrounds or different levels of commitment or whatever. So I just kind of match their energy. And then the ones that really want to be involved, I prioritize them the most. And then I just get the random urges to hit some of them up. And, it's like we've had a couple siblings that have been rejected by a few others. And there's been some, inner politics between the group. And I'm sort of the moderator, leader, and kind of the judge and the disciplinarian to some extent. And I tell them all the time, I'm like, look, yes, I totally get the starvation for family. I totally get it because I had it. And that's why I put as much effort as I do into organizing, keeping us all together. However, even if we had grown up together, there would still be some falling outs. You could almost argue that the likelihood is not any different, really. I mean, so I match the energy with the ones that are less involved. And then the ones that are more involved, I make sure to prioritize them as much as possible.
Cool. Yeah, so talk to me a little bit about like the closeness and proximity that some of your siblings might be. Are you, I know you said you live in a small town, but are there siblings that live nearby that you could have easily have crossed paths with growing up? Or is it more everybody's sort of scattered around all over the country?
Most of my siblings are scattered across the Midwest, actually. There's a decent amount of us represented in the South and other parts of Texas. But generally speaking, the closest sibling that I've found that I would have crossed paths with is still about 3.5, 4 hours from me. And it's actually a pair of twin girls. They're actually the oldest of all of us. And they were born in a very small town in Louisiana, actually. It's funny, too, because really, there's not many small town people in our group of siblings. Matter of fact, most of them are from major metropolitans, and most of them are, again, throughout the Midwest, mostly like Illinois, Indiana, Wisconsin, Ohio, a lot throughout that area.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, now we did have a set of triplets born in Dallas, which Dallas is about 3 hours from me. And then we did have one sister that was born in Fort Worth, but she was raised in Arkansas and now lives in North Carolina.
Got it. Okay. So in order to cross paths or meet up with any of these siblings, it's at least a mini road trip to get there. Cool. All right, shifting gears a little bit, I'm curious what your mom's perception of all of these new relationships coming into your life has been like, and how has that affected her?
I'm glad you asked that question because honestly, there's a piece of my story that I've left out that I really need to involve because it played a big significant role in my life.
Okay.
So my mother wanted children for nearly 11 years, and all of her friends that she grew up with, they all married their high school sweethearts and started punching out babies, right out of high school. And my mother, not so much. Well, for the beginning of it, my mother has a best friend who has 3 daughters. And so she helped raise those 3 daughters, but always with the hope that one day she'd have her own child. So eventually she does have a child, be it me. And then as I'm being raised, she tells me, look, Zachary, she says, Zachary, I know you don't have any siblings, because at that point she'd already blocked it out of her brain. Like she really kind of convinced herself and just forgot about everything. Honestly, okay. I mean, but she's like, Zachary, you don't have any siblings, but these 3 girls are the closest things to sisters you'll ever have. And so I got to be pretty involved with them for the most of it, despite the oldest one's 15 years older than me. Next one's 11 years older. The next one's 7 years older. So, despite being that much older than me and also living, a good little 15-minute drive from us, I did get to experience some sibling bonding with them. And they all had children really young, and they all had lots of children really fast. So I've kind of got to be an uncle since I was 7 years old, So I've gotten a little bit of experience of that. But it made me long more for my own, too, my own flesh and blood. And anyway, once I figured all this out, once we found everything, once I confronted my mother, I told my mother, look, I could really resent you, but I know you did not lie at me with malicious intentions. However, your husband did lie to me. That's the big difference why I forgave her. And, I forgave her, but I didn't forgive him. So I said, you know what, Mother? If you promise me we can be constructive with this, it's all water under the bridge. And so we had a long, long heart-to-heart. We cried it out. I forgave her. And she has been thrilled with the fact that I have siblings. She almost feels like they're her other children. And it's kind of funny because most of us siblings that are involved with each other, we will refer to each other's respective moms as Mama and then their first name. Like I have one that's Mama Debbie, got another one that's Mama Kate. You know, it's almost like we revere our brothers and sisters' moms as a second string mom, sort of. I mean, for context, my brother in Chicago, his mom, she actually passed away last year. And I mean, I went to her funeral, you know, and it's just like my brother in Indianapolis, he has a stepfather. His story's very funny too. And when you get him on your show, or if you get him on your show, you're going to love his story. But his mother got married the same year that he found our biological father. So he got two dads in 1 year. He went from being kid of a single mom to a dad and a bonus dad in that 1 year. And so his bonus dad, we call him Papa Rick because his name's Rick, and you know, he's like another second string parentish kind of person. But unfortunately, same story. He passed away last year, and about 4 or 5 of us all showed up at his funeral too. So we've really kind of gotten a lot of bonus moms and even a couple bonus stepdads throughout the whole deal.
Right. So the support circle has grown exponentially, it sounds like.
Absolutely. And now we've got children too. You know, now we got all the grandkids. And what's really interesting about that is, so in my background, I was 28 when I had my first child, and I felt like an old maid myself just because, again, where I'm from, everybody marries their high school sweetheart. They've got 3 or 4 kids by the time they're 21, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And me, I was that crazy, wacky Zach that decided to go out and chase the dollar and moved all these crazy places and stuff. And I always wanted at least one child at 28. And part of it's because my mother had me at 28, her mother had her father had her, and her father before him. It's like 6 generations, and I thought it'd be kind of cool to have that chain. Yeah. And I managed to succeed. My traveling lifestyle was never conducive to a marriage or a good long-term relationship. And I've had some great ex-girlfriends in the past, but we just had different paths in lives. Heck, half of my ex-girlfriends are some of my best friends, you know, some people that I really care a lot about. But I just, you know, my life took me all over. And so I got to Googling down a rabbit hole because I knew I didn't want to donate, because I would never, even though I love my dad and I'm glad things worked out with me and him, I would never put a child through what I had to go through, ever, right. Period, you know. But I thought, why don't I figure out a small, contained, controlled way to do this? So I went down a Google rabbit hole of I went down a web search rabbit hole of, can you have kids with a friend? So anyway, I did that, and I come across a website, and I get on this website, and it's basically like a dating site, but it's without the dating. It's women of all makes and models, shapes, and imagine it, any kind of walk of life, looking for men to have children by them. And anyway, I meet this lady on there. She had just turned 40. She had never been married, never had children. She had this loser boyfriend that kept saying he was going to give her children, and 12 years in the relationship, he still wouldn't. And so she dumped him on her 40th birthday and said, dude, I'm running out of time. So I meet her on there. We job interview each other. We vet each other for about 2 months. We go through all the hypotheticals. Okay, do you believe in X, Y, and Z? All right, I believe in X, Y, and Z. We got to see at least eye to eye on 75% of everything. All right, if Junior does this, would you whoop him? If Juniorette does this, would you ground her? Do you believe in this? Do you believe in that? We went through all the big stuff that would normally, you know, the stuff that you would typically hide from a boyfriend, girlfriend, or a hookup. We talked about it right out the gate so we would know we synced up on everything.
Yeah.
And we said, sure, let's do it. We did some IVF, and now I've got a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old and still a freezer full of embryos with this lady. And we've never been romantically involved. She's one of my best friends in the entire world. I actually have a house for her on the foot of my property. Her and my 2 children I have by her live on the foot of my property, a little ways down from my place. And she plans on thawing out those embryos and having as many kids by me as she can. Meanwhile, I'm out and about, and I'm not against the idea of marriage and having kids a conventional way too. So that's a whole nother twist in the story of my donor conception. I'm a donor, but on a much smaller scale.
Got it. Yes, in a much more known and available scale, it sounds like.
I'm going to be at all the baseball games and all that crap that I can.
Awesome. So, wow, your story is really, like, there's such stark contrast between the before times of knowing all of this and the after. You went from one end of the spectrum of having, quite a small family to one of the largest families that I've come across on this show so far. So talk to me a little bit more about like how that felt with where, it's almost like 2 different lives that you've had. Or at least that's how I'm reading it right now. Does it feel like that to you?
Absolutely. I like to put it this way. Growing up, I was a very, very lonely only child. I savored every minute I had with my mom's best friend's 3 kids, which I call them my Graham sisters. Their last name is Graham, kind of like a graham cracker. So they're my Graham sisters. And of course, I savored every moment I had with the 3 of them, but they had their own home life, their own everything. So majority of the time I was all alone, all by myself with nothing but my thoughts in my head. I just always dreamt that I had family somewhere, that I could claim some sort of, heritage from someone, and I was part of some sort of dynasty of some sort. And, it was a big deal. I finally, so toward my teen years, when I was resenting toward my mother, I become a very angry, bitter kind of person for a while. I tried not to show it on the outside. Matter of fact, a lot of people that knew me back then wouldn't even know I was going through that. I got pretty good at masking it. But I was basically bitter, sad, and kind of hollow in a lot of aspects. But, and not to say that it wasn't all bad. I enjoyed life, and such, but I was definitely missing a lot. I felt like a stranger inside my own skin.
Yeah.
And then after finding my dad, and again, anytime I say my dad, that's the guy that did the business with the magazine and the plastic cup. That's my dad, Oh my gosh, my life took a complete 180. Granted, I've always been pretty ambitious, but now I feel like I belong in the world. When I look in the mirror, I see something that belongs in this world, not something alien. Right. And having the emotional support of a lot of my brothers and sisters, my aunt, my uncle, my grandparents on his side, all these numerous cousins of his, it's just a truly beautiful thing. I don't look in the mirror anymore and ask myself, "Oh, what is this?" I look at it and I go, "Wow, I've got a lot to uphold. I've got a lot to do in this world, and I want to do the best I can." And it's been a beautiful thing, man. Like I'm happier now than I ever thought I could ever be. And I didn't realize my life could get as beautiful as it has.
Wow. Now, so the donor obviously has been involved in yours and your siblings' lives. It sounds like his extended family, did you just mention that they are embracing of all of this as well?
Yeah, now my grandparents, you would love to meet my grandmother. She's a wisecracker. And what's funny about it is, out of my siblings, my dad looks like a mix between my grandma and my grandpa. To be expected. But what's weird is, most of us grandkids, we look like a spectrum that leads from the grandma to our grandpa.
Uh-huh.
And it's funny because a lot of us look identical to our grandmother, and some of us look identical to our grandfather. And I look like a male version of my grandma. Like me and my brother from Indianapolis and my sister from Kansas City, we look like our grandmother. It's really weird. And then some of us look like our grandfather. Well, as my grandmother would say, "Look, I'm glad to have all of y'all, but don't expect a Christmas card from every single one of us. That's a lot of writing to do, and I got arthritis in my old hands."
All right. Well, that's great. That they're so welcoming of it all. And I guess that I'm not going to say that's to be expected, but when the donor decided to have accessibility, it sounds like he may have informed his family that, hey, there may come a day where there's a whole clan of people that I'm responsible for, bringing into the world. And you got to be prepared for that.
If I give you his full version of it, I'm going to butcher it and not do it service. But the short version of my explanation and my answer to what you just said is yes. He very much so communicated it to a specific few people, and he did it with very pure intentions. Matter of fact, when we had our first big sibling get together, he made a speech, and he did these candles and everything. Matter of fact, it's actually on a video on my YouTube channel. Shameless plug, Zachary UK on YouTube. But he made this video and he gave this speech, and one of the funnier lines in it was, he goes, "Look, I want y'all to understand, I didn't just do this because I needed beer or pizza money. I did this with a lot of intent and a lot of thought behind it, and I'm absolutely honored that y'all want to have anything to do with me." Mm-hmm. So and then there's more footage, of course, of him talking about his thoughts, feelings, and concerns on that. But that's the main gist of it, though, yeah.
Got it. So you said when you guys visit each other twice a year, once is in New Orleans, and then the other time...
It kind of floats.
Yeah, so... What's the vibe of those meetups? Do you tend to plan certain activities around meeting up, or is it more just, hey, this is about coming together and hanging out? What do these meetups tend to look like?
It's funny you ask that. So our meetups, and they're all over the board, but thanks to me and a couple other of our more organizational planner type siblings, We've just about got them into 2 separate camps. The New Orleans one is always going to be the more family-friendly one, which is kind of funny when you think about it, one of the alcohol capitals of the world. But it's because New Orleans has so much of our family history there. And we like to spend time with the grandparents and our aunt and our uncle. And it's the New Orleans one is always the more wholesome one. And the September one can be. Now, September floats. I've hosted it more in various parts of Texas. I've hosted it in Price twice, and I've hosted it in another town that I own property at, kind of down on the coast. But it's intended to float. A matter of fact, we might have ours at the beach in Alabama because this one brother of ours really likes to go down there, and he said he'd host it. So September's not nailed down to anywhere necessarily, at least not yet. But September tends to be more of the grown-up time where we leave the kids at home with their other parents or with their grandparents or, their other grandma or whatever. Right. We tend to have a little more grown-up time, knock a few beers back, eat some pizza, talk, play some crazy, Cards Against Humanity kind of night, stuff like that. But we generally pick just a few activities and then let everything else happen around it. That's what we tend to do. Now, eventually, every year on my birthday, and we might end up making 3 every year at some point. I have a compound that I have here in Price, and it's 52 acres. And, there's one section that's for my kid's mom to live at, my kids. I've got my little section. I've got a general population area that's opened up to any of my brothers and sisters or any of my really close friends that I deem, to come to put a little spots on, little houses or some of villas, whatever. And eventually I want to start hosting the September get-togethers on my property here.
That's cool. Have them all come to you.
Exactly.
Cool. Well, I think your story is quite unique in that, this opened up a whole new world for you. And I don't often hear of stories like this from other donor-conceived people where it sounds like you went through a trauma of sorts.
Oh, definitely.
But one that yielded a reward that you probably could never have imagined.
It made me just spicy enough. Right. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this. So, the uncertainty of everything in those early stages of finding everything out, before you knew who the donor was, before you were aware of all of the siblings that you have, and really just knowing that you were donor conceived and not having much else. Do you remember what it felt like in those moments where you had no idea that you had such a large family out there?
Oh, yeah, I mean, what did it not feel like? It was a mixture of so many emotions. Like I said, I was originally enraged at the fact that I was lied to, but I was also simultaneously enamored by the possibility of this crazy, amazing life I could have. And once I said there's a fork in the road. I can either be resentful, angry, and bitter about being lied to, or I can be constructive and look at this through a more positive lens and just go out there and, even if I don't live for another day, at least die trying to get to bond with some of these people. And so I just said, there's only one option between those two. And so when I forgave my mom and her and I hugged it out, I'm in it 100%. I absolutely love my mother to death. She can be a pain in my ass. Hopefully I've still got some color left in my hair. I don't know. But all in all, she's one of my most favorite people in the whole wide world. And she helped me get this started. And like I said, losing my 3 best friends, it really changed my perspective on life and what it can be and what it has to be and what it doesn't have to be. And so I just said, you know what? I may die tomorrow on my lunch break. I may choke on a chicken bone or something. But you know what? Damn it. I'm going to play the best with the cards I've been dealt, because you might not get to choose how they're dealt to you, but you do get to choose how you play them.
I love that. Okay, so one more question on your decision to be open with all of this information as you were discovering all of this in the early days. Did you have any reservations when it came to kind of putting this out there to friends and family and people in your life? Or was it pretty clear that you were going to be loud and proud about all of this?
It's funny you asked me that, because different siblings have had different views. And I've definitely got some siblings that are afraid of what their other social circles would think, but I've never cared. I mean, I guess that's kind of my general mindset anyway. I mean, if I want to do something, I'm going to do it. Unless it's immoral or bad or something. I mean, if there's nothing morally wrong with it, and there's nothing, I'm not doing anything bad to another individual. I mean, I would rather everyone have a positive opinion of me. But at the same time,
Yeah.
if it's what I want to do, I'm going after it. I don't care. And
Right.
something this big warranted, hey, it better be a damn good reason someone would want to stop me. And fortunately, I didn't have any of the firewalls like some of my siblings have had. But even had I had them, I still would have blasted through and went for it. And I want to add, too, there's a man who I looked up to a lot throughout my early life. It's actually my mom's best guy friend, or it's her best friend's husband. He's the father of the three girls that I claim as my grand-sisters. Real positive male role model. And I kind of always, he was like my fantasy dad. Like, I guess the guy subconsciously I wished was my dad or I could grow up to be like or whatever. And sometimes I like to put myself in the shoes of what if he would have been my upbringing dad? And I still would have pursued it. Now, I would have wanted to have been as respectful as possible had he been that. So that could have been one barrier that I could have seen being a thing had my life started differently. But even if that, at the end of the day, dude, this is about me, and this is about information that, and I'd say this with any person in a donor conception situation, it's about the donor conceived person. You are the one person that never got to have a say in any of this when you were being planned out to be brought into this world. So anyone that has any malice or has any bad thoughts, feelings, and concern on it, that's their own problem, because especially if it's the parents, if it's the mother, if it's the donor father, if it's the upbringing dad or whatever, if it's any of them three, as far as I'm concerned, their feelings are all secondary because they created a human being without its consent and put that human being into a very novel situation that could have been bad, could have been good. Either one can happen. But at the end of the day, the burden of proof is on them, not the child. I believe that child is entitled to, well, how would I say it? Not entitled to, but I believe the pursuit of that knowledge is completely understandable and allowable when it comes to that child.
Totally agree. Well said. Cool. Do you have any closing thoughts? Maybe we haven't covered a certain part of your story yet, or maybe you want to dive a little bit deeper into something that's already been brought up that you want to, kind of go back to. Anything to sort of round out the chat.
If you're a donor-conceived person and you're listening to this, just know there's no right or wrong way to address this situation in life. If you have any curiosity at all about the other part of your family, don't be ashamed of it, and don't let other people make decisions that are going to dictate your happiness, peace of mind, or closure for the rest of your life. If you have to, figure out a tactful way to go about it and just pursue it. It's a part of you. Don't let society lie to you and sell you this whole thing of, oh, well, blood doesn't matter, blah, 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 blah. It's a very incremental part of a human being. Again, fish swim and birds fly for the exact same reason. It's in them veins.
And I think that's the note we'll end it on. Thank you, Zachary, for sharing your very unique story with us. I think this one probably took us to some new places on the podcast in a number of ways. It's not often we hear of such wholly positive outcomes, or that DCPs become donors themselves. The beauty of these conversations, to me at least, is that we all share the same starting point. But where our stories go is anyone's guess. And as long as we follow our intuitions, it's my belief that we'll end up right where we're supposed to be. If you'd like to keep up with the podcast on social media, you can follow @Inconceivably Connected on Instagram to stay on top of what's to come here in the future. As always, if you're enjoying these episodes, please consider sharing with others and leaving a 5-star rating and review. Also, if you'd like to know more about my own story, you can find my book online titled Inconceivably Connected, a true story of shocking DNA results and chasing the unknown. The music, editing, and production for the Inconceivably Connected podcast were done by myself, Nick Ludwig. And if you're donor conceived and would like to share your story on the podcast, please fill out the quick form that's linked in the episode description of any episode. That'll do it for this week. See you again next Monday.